Hello, everyone. You're welcome to Guardian Social Ventures' first of many social sector dialogues. Guardian Social Ventures GSV is a subsidiary of Venture Garden Group, focused on providing innovative solutions to today's social challenges. In the course of this dialogue, we will explore Nigeria's social program system in light of current COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the emerging role that technology has to play in this space. I am Oshaya, and I'll be moderating today's dialogue. Joining me is a panel of distinguished thought leaders in the social sector and technology sector. In no particular order, please join me in welcoming the founder of She Foundation and a cosmopolitan who has put in over 2 decades of work committed to the progression of Africans from poverty to prosperity across 23 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, Shola Afolayan. You're welcome, Shola. Shola, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me? Thank you.
Yes, I can hear you now. You're welcome. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
We also have with us today the co-founder and director of Budgets, Nigeria's leading fiscal transparency group that uses creative design and technology to improve access to public budgets. Oluseun Onigbinde. You're welcome, Oluseun.
Thank you so much. It's great being here. It's a pleasure. Thanks.
Great to have you here too. Also on the panel, I'm not sure if she's here yet, is the founder of Ideation Hub Africa, a social profit accelerator which supports nonprofits, innovators, civil society organizations, and public sector agencies through executive education, collaborative platforms, funding opportunities, and advisory. Debola Deji Kuromi. Debola, are you here? I guess not. So she will join us in the course of the dialogue. Next on the panel is also Bumi Akiyamiju, who will join us shortly. Bumi is a serial entrepreneur, technology innovator, and investor, and is also the CEO of Venture Garden Group. Venture Garden Group is the parent company of Guardian Social Ventures, the company hosting today's social sector dialogue. Now, also joining us.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, Bumi is here already. Hi, Bumi. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
Also with us is a thought leader in the international development sector and executive director of Fountain Initiative for Social Development, a faith-based organization focused on social impact through education, entrepreneurship, and employability. Jennifer Pierce. Good to have you here, Jennifer.
Hi, guys. Good evening. Nice to be here.
Hi, welcome. And finally, we have here with us a partner at Passion Incubator, an innovative and early stage tech investment firm, who also leads the strategy and growth team at the Government Enterprise Empowerment Program, Africa's largest microloan scheme, GEEP. Taiwo Ajetomobi, thank you for joining us, Taiwo.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Shay.
Okay. Most importantly to your audience, thank you for joining us today. We are most appreciative. Now, in the course of today's dialogue, we'll cover 3 focal areas. We'll look at current realities, the impact of COVID-19 on Nigerian households, SMEs, and large corporate organizations and the NGOs. Next, we'll explore governance structures, systems, and policies for national social programs in Nigeria, such that these programs are sustainable and can withstand socio-economic crises like the current COVID-19 pandemic. Finally, we'll talk about how we can leverage technology in building a more resilient system for our social programs. Afterwards, we'll take questions from the audience and subsequently call it a day. But just before we get started, I would like to bring to fore a few housekeeping rules to enable us to have a seamless and productive session. They have also been shared in the chat room already, but just to reiterate, as you join in, please introduce yourself in the chat room with your name, designation, and company. You could also include your website if possible. Secondly, to enable us to keep in touch with you, we'll be sharing a link to capture your contact information. Kindly help us complete. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be taking questions from the audience, so please feel free to ask your questions via the Q&A module as the session progresses. We'll try to answer as much questions as possible within the limited time frame that we have. We may also call on you to ask your question live, so please prepare just in case. Please, would also like you to encourage our panelists to use the clap or like icon to show your support during the session. You can also follow the live tweets of this dialogue on Twitter at GSV Nigeria. Please feel free to also share your quotes and updates from the session on your social media pages. And don't forget to tag us so we can like and retweet. Our Twitter handle is GSV Nigeria and Instagram handle is Garden Social Ventures. Finally, please do fill the post-dialogue survey that will be shared afterwards. We've got a great team to attend to whatever issues or challenges you may have in the chat room. Thank you. At this juncture, I would like to invite Fumilola Eniolorunda, the Chief Operations Officer at Venture Garden Group, to give us a welcome address. Fumilola, you have the floor now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the maiden edition of GSV's Social Sector Dialogue. We're very delighted that you're able to join this dialogue, and I'm very confident that you'll be glad you did. I'm sure many of you are wondering who we are and what we do, so permit me to quickly introduce Garden Social Ventures to you. GSV is the social sector focused company of Venture Garden Group. At GSV, we leverage technology in driving scalability and sustainability of social programs in emerging markets. We believe strongly that effectively designed and implemented technology-enabled social programs will lift millions of people out of poverty and increase the prosperity of emerging economies. In short words, we're nation builders. The Social Sector Dialogue is a series of webinars and conferences bringing together and engaging private, public, and third sector leaders in constructive conversations leading to new ways of thinking with national scale impact. This is the first in this series, and we're very excited you're able to join us today. The advent of the COVID-19 pandemic has, without any doubt, fundamentally changed the world from the way we used to know it. The way we design and implement social programs for impact needs to change as we all try to adapt to our new realities. That's why we have chosen to focus this dialogue on redesigning social programs in light of COVID-19 and the emerging role of technology. I would like to appreciate our panel of speakers. Thank you all very much for accepting this invitation and giving your time to move Nigeria forward. I look forward to engaging conversations from you all, as well as insightful comments and questions from all our guests and participants. A quick announcement to all our registered participants. Please note that we'll be sending you a copy of our intelligence report. It's the first of a series of reports which we're going to be sending quarterly. The title of this one is A Spotlight on Social Protection to You. I encourage every one of you to register so that you can get a copy of this intelligence report. Do enjoy the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Fumilola. Debola Dechikromi has joined us. You are welcome, Debola. Debola, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. So I'll get right to it then. As I had mentioned, the first area would be focused on current realities, where we'd explore the impact of COVID-19 on Nigerian households, SMEs, businesses, and the NGO sector. Now, my first question would be directed to you, Taiwo. The macro effect of COVID-19 on the economy have been documented, which include a fall in both aggregate supply and demand, decline in exports, and rise in overall government spending. But much less has been said about the effects on the people who are the first to bear the brunt of the impact, the individuals, micro and small enterprises, and daily wage earners operating in the informal sector. So with your work on GEEP and interaction with people at the grassroots level, how would you describe the impact of COVID-19 on Nigerian households, especially following the recent lockdown? Taiwo, over to you.
Hey, Shay, thanks for the question. I'll keep my comments at the beginning here brief, but I'm sure that as we go through the conversation, we'll get a chance to unbundle some of it a bit more. We've seen, as we would imagine, right, an immediate sort of drop off in revenue for MSMEs across the board. I think you have some of that is going to be short term just because of the lockdown, and then some of it is going to be more protracted. So for instance, in Passion Incubator, we run a co-working space, and we already have SMEs telling us that they're not coming back to the space once the lockdown is fully lifted. And that for us is a reflection of what's happening in the market, right? Business is down, so revenues are down. Secondly, I think you've also seen an impact on supply chain, right? Any business right now that is dependent on goods coming in from a different part of town, whether it's a different part of Nigeria, or for those that depend on supplies coming from outside the country, right, from a completely different country, those supply chains have been completely disrupted. All right, and so a lot of those guys are trying to figure out now, what do they do next? Do they switch and pivot and start to deal in a different type of product? Do they become a completely different type of business? All questions they have to ask themselves. I think the last sort of structural issue we've seen is credit has just dried up in the market. And none of this is a surprise. I think the only sort of surprise here is the scale at which this has happened and how quickly it has happened. This affects things you're seeing across the globe. Nigeria is not, a peculiar case, but I don't know that we have ever had to go through such a significant change in such a short amount of time. Those are the things that we're seeing from view my work in Passion Incubator and the Government Enterprise Empowerment Program.
Okay, thank you, Taiwo. Seun, if I were to ask you, how would you say COVID-19 is impacting households in Nigeria today, families, individuals?
All right, thank you so much. It's a whole pleasure being here today. Thanks for inviting me. And I think it's clear about where we stand. If you look at our profile, interestingly, our poverty and inequality report came out a few weeks ago, and it clearly showed that the incidence of poverty in Nigeria is very, very high, and a whole lot of people are also within the edge. So COVID-19 has created some sort of emergent poor for Nigeria. So people who possibly lost their jobs, who possibly could not even have means to their livelihood in the last few weeks or months. And so suddenly they find themselves within that bracket. So in a country like Nigeria, where you have like 80% of people, especially in semi-urban and rural communities, live hand to mouth or live on businesses that have to generate cash flow on a daily basis to survive, then definitely you are clearly sure that there's a crisis on the ground itself. There's been a whole lot of adjustments across board, which is people have decided to, depend on relatives, families, friends, and things like that. Few people have gotten palliative support from government, but reality, we are walking into a strong dip, a very big dip in terms of GDP. I heard the Minister of Finance was saying it could be as bad as 9%. IMF are saying it could be as bad as 4%. And when the economy does not grow, money circulation, is a problem. Credit creation is a problem. Entrepreneurial growth is a problem. New ideas that can also generate new activities within the space is a problem. So, we are seeing a depression, a recession. I won't say depression. We've no wish for that, but it can be a very long recession, unless we pull ourselves back up. So, this is the time for Nigeria to critically think about social welfare, to think about even social contract, because social welfare is the fundamental of the social contract theory, which is that income level is not even distributed in an economy. People don't have the same wherewithal. So definitely you are going to tax people on the basis of how much income they can provide or how much capacity they could give. And when people, you redistribute that through benefits to the society. And when the whole society is now sinking, you have, as government, you need to be able to support and provide support to them. And as you've seen in the US, in the UK, in Canada, there have been cash payments. Things that sound ridiculous when this guy, Andrew Yang, who is a candidate in the US election, and he was saying a few months ago that $1,000 should be given to everybody in America as some basic income. And people felt this is useless, this is ridiculous. But in the US, people got $1,200 in their mailbox as cash support just because the government had to provide in a situation that is challenging. And I think that's why we have to even come in all of this conversation, that social welfare, providing support for people is fundamental to the basis of relationship between government and their citizens. And I can go for it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that interesting submission, Sean. Bumi, being a business owner, I'm curious to know how Nigerian business climate is affected by COVID-19 and how Nigerian businesses are responding. Bumi, what do you have to say to that?
Yeah, thank you, Shea, and thanks for having me. Thanks to all the panelists here. I think, the response from a business owner standpoint varies, right? It's very, very clear that this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint, and the impact is going to be very deep. I mean, that's very clear. And it hasn't even started yet, right? Because it will hit, US, UK, China, all these countries, and then trace its way back in all the supply chain, transportation, all of those types of things, because we're highly dependent on all of these different economies. So as a business owner, I think you have different ways to respond. I think people are responding in different ways. Unfortunately, the government support required is not quite there. It's not at the level that we would expect, right? CBN announced 50 billion, but if you check on Twitter, I think it was the newly founder that was saying, hey, I applied for 30 million, I only got 2 million or something like that. So it gives you an idea that what is available compared to the demand, like very, very, very far apart. So what do you do as a business owner? I think it's almost a case where some people are saying, I'm shutting down, right? Some people are saying, let me just take the last money I have, the last resources I have, and let me even see if I can pivot my business to something that is relevant in a COVID-19 era. I am now manufacturing masks. I'm now, producing, things, disinfectants, I'm now delivering e-learning solutions. I used to do something else before, but I pivoted. But only the person who has some last resources that can actually pivot. Other people are dead because we don't have the system that supports. And I like what Sean said earlier, like America literally sent a check to everybody's mailbox. Look at the population of the US, right? But in Nigeria, we have just not prepared, right? When we had the excess crude account, what did we do with the money? But we also did not have the fundamental infrastructure. Even if we had the money, I don't know that we even know where our population is, the poorest population. We don't even have a database, right? We don't even know how to reach them. We don't even know where they are. And that is a black box by itself because we have not prepared, both in terms of the excess crude oil account and funds in there, in terms of the foundational infrastructure required for us to be able to just mail a check into everybody's mailbox. So I think we have a long ways to go, and I'm very worried.
Thank you, Bumi. Interesting to know how business owners are being affected. Jennifer, with your work in the nonprofit sector, how would you say nonprofit organizations are adapting to the pandemic? And what approaches are current non-government organizations taking?
All right, thank you so much for that question. I'll definitely say the pandemic has brought social tech to the forefront, which is something I think that's crept up on us real quick because the sector was really comfortable in doing things reactively, right? So now we have to be proactive. So giving you like an instance will be NGOs now have to adapt to the fact that you need data-driven solutions. You need needs assessments. You can't just assume things anymore. So it also helps you understand the essence of community mapping. It makes you bridge the gap between who you serve and who you are, rather what you stand for. So for example, you'll have to meet more of the community people. You have to hear their stories. You have to engage. Then you also have to draft things that are accordingly to their needs. So I'm not coming to give someone who wants beans oil, right? I'm not coming to create a strategy that doesn't fit the plan. And NGOs per se are also understanding the level of collaboration that this new normal will take. Before, everybody's working in silos, everybody's trying to do their own thing, and understanding that is literally like weaving a system where we tackle, the gaps of welfare. So I know someone mentioned that we tackle the fact that we don't have the systems which we assumed we have, and knowing that we have to start drafting, plans, policies that will actually affect, the average Nigerian. And definitely that collaboration between the sectors, which I definitely know that this conversation will, talk about, but understanding that NGOs really are the middlemen, between solutions and ideas per se in their own rights. So yes, that I would definitely say that NGOs are literally having to come upfront to tackle these situations, and understanding that, they have solutions themselves and they would need to prefer them now, and not just wait later and assume, but actually planning things that would not only be about giving fish, but teaching people how to fish per se.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. Now, Debola, we've heard from Taiwo, Bumi, Sheo, and Jennifer on the impact of COVID-19. And I know that as Sheo and Bumi mentioned, or as Sheo mentioned, that the government had set up some palliative measures, like the conditional cash transfer of 20,000 naira to the most vulnerable households. Lagos State also had a plan to feed at least 200,000 households, and the Central Bank of Nigeria set up the 50 billion naira fund for household and MSMEs. But bearing in mind that over 80% of working people are employed in the informal sector, and the fact that over 90 million Nigerians are living in extreme poverty, my question is, and I'll ask it directly, are our existing social interventions or social programs effective at mitigating the impact of COVID-19?
Okay, thank you very much for the question, and such brilliance from the panelists already. So stark reality, and without mincing words, would be that our social interventions, our social system, and our protective programs are not effective and are not sufficient in terms of the infrastructure required to really mitigate the effects of the COVID-19. And that should not surprise you if as at very recently, Nigeria was still considered to be the poverty capital of the world, with very high percentages across all the spectrum of deprivation. It should be very obvious to you that we have a real crisis in our hands in terms of how all the sectors, from the government as the core, development deliverer, to all other sectors, the social sector, the third sector, and the core business terrain, how all these sectors have been unable to sort of find a meeting point to create the kind of solutions that work. Okay, so obviously we are in a state of emergency, we're in a crisis, and there are a number of indicators that really show us why our social interventions are obviously not effective and not reaching the vulnerable poor and those who are going to be the most impacted, by COVID-19. Of course, a big issue is our absence of a data-driven policy model, right? So we don't even know. And I love what Jennifer was saying about a new community-centric or beneficiary-centric approach to the interventions. So NGOs are learning this very quickly. I have a number of our clients who are already saying, what does it take now for us to really understand what the issues are from the community's point of view, from the beneficiary's point of view? The same thing applies to whatever the government wants to do, to whatever social saviors or impact-driven organizations want to do, whether they're businesses or NGOs, right? So there is an absence of data-driven solutions. Our interventions are not built around a crystal clear understanding of what's going on at the bottom of the pyramid. A second big issue is our facilities are currently crippled. So you can imagine that whatever interventions across healthcare, whether it's direct care delivery or it's mental health, or what we want to do with distribution of social welfare funds, or even information management and reorienting the people, these things are carried by the infrastructure of existing facilities, whether it's health facilities, information facilities, financial institutions, and how they can redistribute this wealth and all of that. So we are, obviously doing poorly because we already had a weakness as far as our facilities were developed enough to carry. And a third big thing would be around, current bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is still a bane of governance and leadership in Africa, right? And it's driven by the fact that we are, our leaders are, their first desire is to make an appearance of delivering value and creating results as against really getting the job done. So those who don't have to have their faces out there will first take pictures and show that they are doing something when we should be moving rapidly along the value chain. So the bureaucracy delays how quickly interventions, which are not even sufficient, can get to the most vulnerable. I'll just stop here, but I believe we can expand the conversation as we go along.
Thank you very much for that, Debola. A really insightful point. So one is data-driven policy model, absence of right facilities, and then bureaucracy by the government. Sheil, I'll come back to you quickly, writing on Debola's insightful response, because I think that Debola referenced it with the data-driven policy model. Bumi also mentioned it when he was given his when he was talking about the impact on the businesses. I think there are still some systemic problems. For instance, generally, I don't think the government has announced any key details of any of the interventions announced, which limits scope for accountability. Little to no information is known about who is getting the money. Therefore, evaluative judgments cannot be made about the impact of the funds. Additionally, given the lack of a comprehensive database of informal workers, like Debola and Bumi mentioned, as well as institutional financial exclusion, there may also be the added risk that the funds will not reach the right people, which are the questions and doubts many Nigerians have today. So Sheil, what are your thoughts on these, as well as other implementation gaps, especially with the recent pandemic, and more importantly, how can we drive transparency and accountability?
Thank you so much. It's and I think our points are colliding. The fundamental challenge here is data. Without data, there's little we can do. And I think I was listening to the Lagos State governor recently, and they made a point saying that if there's a lesson that they have found from this whole crisis, is that citizen data is extremely important. And I know for a while we've been talking about single reference data for citizens. So something you have in the US, like Social Security, or like you have a national insurance number. We have NIN, the national identity number. And we have not been able to consummate this as it should be. We're talking about joining databases together. So if that is not structured, it's a bit difficult for you even to track palliatives and social welfare schemes to people. Because the first question the first challenge you have here is that who gets what? On what basis does anyone get anything? For example, I'll go back to the US again, which is not everyone got $1,200. There was an income bracket that qualified you to get that. And so the government has sufficient level of information on its citizens to know the income bracket you belong to, easily based on your tax filings. And that gets you some of support or reprieve from government. And I think that's fundamental to everything. We need to have a solid citizen database, because without that, we have CSOs that are constantly chasing the shadows. They're constantly asking, is this the right person to get this quality? Is this the right person to get this kind of support? The second level is about radical transparency. Because, we've tracked palliatives or funding of relief programs twice. And this is the third time we are doing it in budget. We did it once during the Ebola crisis. We did it in a massive flooding incident that happened in 2012, that around almost 24 states were involved. And it's the same problem. Without radical transparency to know who gets what from the government, Because if you say, oh, we got 100 million naira donated to who? We got this fund. So you need some form of radical, detailed data, to say, this is who we are giving these funds to. This is who gets this kind of amount of money. And I think that's the second missing puzzle that makes transparency and accountability of, and it's just because the third leg is missing, which is technology. I mean, in the US, not everyone had a mail inbox. Some people were directly credited to their accounts and things like that. We must be able to know Nigerians to the level that we can leapfrog middlemen and us having to pass cash through agents, contractors, and all that. That's one of the things that's incentivizing all this old corruption thing happening, where you don't have solid database of your citizens, when you're not ready to commit to radical transparency, and two, you're not even using technology to engage. So, for example, someone is handing over paper vouchers, but in the system where then there's an integrated database of students in schools, of their parents, and so their parents get a voucher, and the parent can easily take just a QR code somewhere, and they can plug it to some form of device, and they plug it to that device, and somehow their palliative is added to them in a seamless manner without even any form of, a middleman or whoever. And that's the situation. That's the Nigeria that would find corruption like a pastime issue. But as long as you're embedding people, the human element into it, we would keep going through this same cycle of fighting corruption. To be honest with you, it's not supposed to be public resource or public revenue. In my own view, it's a sacred item. So because it's not yours, it's a communal stuff. So you have to be responsible with it. And so that's what we see. And the last thing also about how our institutions are grossly weak. So in situations when you even find out people have abused system or have profited unduly from all of these issues, are there punitive institutions that hold them accountable? I mean, where's the ICPC in all of this? Where's the EFCC in all of this? Are they all involved? We had a situation in Katsina like a month ago where people were given 20,000 naira, but there was another door that you had to pass through. That 3,000 was taken from you for mobile phones. Yes. They said they were purchasing mobile phones for them. I don't know when that became part of it. They had a union fees. You had to pay union fees of 2,000 naira. I mean, someone just created his own racket. I mean, in all that space. I mean, and that's why we think through budget. If we're able to make sure that there's a comprehensive citizen there, if we're able to ensure that everyone is committed to radical transparency and accountability, because that's a critical part of governance. If we have technology that is the major framework, that wrapped around all of this, and finally, people will still escape some of these gaps. You must have institutions that can hold them finally to account. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Oluseun. So I hear data, I hear infrastructure, I hear technology. Yeah. You're the social development expert. So at the moment in Nigeria, hearing from what all our panelists have said, is there a need to redesign our social programs in Nigeria today?
I mean, that's extremely...
Shola, I meant Shola, sorry. Thank you.
Oh, Shola is my boss, yeah.
Shola, so is there a need to redesign our social programs in Nigeria today?
Well, thank you for wanting to bully me, even online. Hello, everyone. I think we have brilliant ideas and suggestions already made. In terms of the structure that we have in Nigeria, I'm aware that there is a social protection policy, and that should expire this year. But if you look at the content of the policy itself, it's not fully being implemented, just like several things in Nigeria. You have those policies, you have those papers, but then it is launched and then it is put somewhere. However, I must say that some aspects of the policy measurements and areas are being met around the homegrown school feeding program, free feeding meals in schools. It's not perfect, but it's ongoing. There is a cash transfer program that is being done, that has been spoken about extensively here now. And however, if you look at the sector that is most impacted, like directly during the pandemic, is the health sector. And if you There are targets around universal health coverage. Nigeria is way behind around that. So in redesigning, looking at this, firstly, we need to look at revise the policy papers that we have, the policy document that we have is due for review. Sheol spoke on the need to use data to inform the policies that we implement or the projects that are being launched. The way we define poverty has to change. It's not people that are only physically living with disability. It's not people that are elderly. There are a lot of people that are even working that are poor. You have people say you are just one illness away from poverty. People that are working in banks, you fall ill, you go to GoFundMe, everybody becomes like corporate beggar just to fend for that. And then you see people falling further into poverty. So looking at those mechanisms and redefine, everyone should, different stakeholders should come together and redefine what poverty is. And I know that the cash transfer office actually do a community-based understanding and definition of poverty. So in the North or in the South, it could be different. Some household would define someone poor in their community as, oh, I don't see smoke coming out from this particular person's house. It shows that even though they can get wood from the forest, but they don't even have anything to cook. That is their own definition. Some other places, it could be how many infrastructure or amenities do you have in there? Do you have how many bulbs do you have? So those definitions need to be redefined and then targeted. Like it's been said, we don't have enough data to inform our policies or projects, and that needs to change. And when we have policies, they need to be interlined. For instance, in our budgeting cycle, what is informing the budget that we set for each of the sector? Education is impacted currently. What is the percentage that at least the education sector must have in the budget? Currently, I think it's about, thanks to budget, I went to your website and quickly did a bit of taking out of data. We have less than 11%, about 11% combined for the health sector and also for education in the budget. And you can see the impact of COVID right now. So those are the things that we need to look at. So in looking at the entire framework of the social protection that we have, it's good that we have a policy, but in the implementation of the policy, it has to be actionable, evidence-based, and bring in the reality, the current realities. Another thing I want to say is during the pandemic, we saw that the state government was so much relying on the federal government. And Nigeria practices federalism, but it's not true federalism. If indeed we practice true federalism, the state government, just like we had in the US, for instance, you had the state of California, in Texas, they were coming up with innovative ideas and solutions and palliatives to cushion the effects of that on their citizens. And I think maybe the state or the local government are being capable. Okay, so even if I go back to local government, just like we have the state looking up to the federal government like a spoiled Nigerian mom. When a Nigerian mother almost like smother you with love. But the federal government should come in only for intervention. But if the states are not empowered to be able, economically empowered or even legislations backed process to quickly respond to the needs of the people. Local governments are closer to the people. State governments are also closer than the federal government. But where are they during the time? I know Lagos State was very active around that. Ondo State was also, I know there was some feedback around the River State governor in what the leadership they all put forward. It is very important that everybody come back to the table and look at how we can practice true federalism. Local government autonomy must be looked at more closely now. In the sharing of if I call the national pie or the national cake, local government should have 20% of allocation, but this is still being channeled through the state government. If with this pandemic, that's why a lot of things were not easily accelerated. So if we have the state and the local government, empowered, their funds are there, and then they can quickly respond. And that is based on an assumption that there's accountability and transparency anyway, which Ishio had talked about. We have security votes that are going to states. It's not accounted for. What are these things? So I think when government is intervening or bailing out states, there should be some conditions that should be into it. Going forward, in looking at the entire social protection space, it is very important that in funds that are being sent to states, there should be conditions put in it. All states should set up a social protection scheme for each of the states, and it goes down also to the LGA level and also even to community and ward level. That is very important. And I also think about that has been mentioned already, insufficient subnational data. I won't say just data, but I think granular data. Like the report, the poverty indices report that was recently released by NBS is at state level. If we have data up to a household level, it will help us to be able to structure information or policies or projects to actually meet the needs of the people. That's very important. I think if we look at all of those, it will help us to redesign the process. The government acknowledges that should be done, and I hope that is expedited as soon as possible. I think another point I would like to touch on is the funding mechanism. Currently, most of the social protection interventions that is being done is being funded by government, and that can, look at the cutback in the budget 2020. I think that is going to, because we are almost a mono economy country. The crude oil is not going to increase in the near future. Gradually, it might pick up, but those are things that we need to look at, diversify and look at other funding mechanisms. And I strongly would say for the funding of maybe the cash to the citizens, or to set up a proper structure for social protection, I would say a lot of people should begin to pay tax, and not just people, individuals, but also corporations. Thank you. Yeah, I think that would.
Okay, thank you, Shola. Thanks a lot.
Do you mind if I add a couple of thoughts on what Shola said?
Okay, Tyler.
Everything Shola said, I agree with. I'm just going to add a couple more comments here. First is the Social Security regime in the US started in 1935. So let us understand like what we're comparing ourselves against, right? We're comparing ourselves against 85 years of continuous development and work. Now, the reality is that there's still no excuse, because you have developing countries that have taken a very deliberate attempt to do like, to lay the right infrastructure, to register their citizens, and to drive policy with data, all right? But it's just important that when we compare, we should compare apples to apples, right? The second thing is we need to know where we're coming from. So over the last 4 years, I'm not going to hold a brief for government, but I will say that over the last 4 years, we have seen pockets of real tangible work that has been done. And I think it's important for Nigerians to know that, appreciate it, and celebrate it, right? Because it's a lot easier to get governments to move when we are talking about the great things government has done versus talking about how they've, they have just failed here and they failed there. It's really, people want to know that, things are working and some things can be improved upon. So whereas I wouldn't agree with the idea that that we haven't absolutely done nothing with respect like social interventions and driving them with data and with technology, the reality of the matter is that we have done some work as a country, but the scale of that work is minuscule compared to the scale of the problem, right? So what we've got to do now is to amplify that narrative, right? And figure out a way to get government to put in more resources. The second is on people, right? The expertise, right? You can't develop data-driven policy if you don't have data-driven personnel, right? And so there's a huge capability gap in our public space, right? Where the people who are responsible for developing 21st century policy may not necessarily have all the knowledge and technical expertise. And so it's a challenge for those who do have that knowledge and expertise to choose to play a part in defining policy, right? So it's just a challenge, I think, to a broader set of Nigerians to be part of the solution. I think the third part of it is just funding, and not necessarily about the funding mechanism. And I agree with Shola that government needs to be much more deliberate about that. But fundamentally, we're a poor country, right? So we just don't make enough money to act in a certain way. Like Nigeria is never going to give $1,000 to every taxpayer. It's just not going to happen. We can't afford it. However, if we are deliberate about our interventions, and if we do have the right data at our fingertips and we have the right infrastructure, right, then we can apply a scalpel, right, and start to cut and trim in the places where we need to cut and trim, and apply palliatives in a very deliberate manner. And I think that what Nigerians are maybe disappointed with today is that we don't seem to have a coherent strategy in how the government is fighting poverty and how the government is seeking to apply palliatives to suffering Nigerians. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Taiwo. Now looking at it now, I hear from the panelists, there's a data problem, there's infrastructure, there's technology. Shola mentioned that we have the social protection policy, but needs to be well implemented and perhaps updated to reflect current realities. And Taiwo now just brought up also the financing problem. So I would like each of the panelists now to talk about, so we've identified the challenges. Now, what policies or systems and governance structures do we need to put in place now so that we can build sustainable and resilient social protection systems in Nigeria? I'd like each panelist to talk about it. I would start with Jennifer.
Thank you. I think I kind of had it in my spirit that you'll call me. All right. So for me, I'm definitely going to go through the NGO lens, if you permit me to say that. One of the biggest issues we have is the lack of data. Not only the lack of data, but the fact that even if you have data, it's not analyzed to like say, a finished product where it helps you advise how to go about interventions. Every day, I'm part of a team where we feed at least 500 people in Jakonde. And I'll definitely tell you that half of the time, you realize that if there was some sort of list, I saw a question go up about the BVN system and how maybe to leverage supporting or working with banks to get data. If you know how many people are in a community, if you understand the dynamics, you'll be able to intervene properly. Now, the social welfare system that you see in countries like the US, right, or the UK is highly focused on knowing demographics and understanding, will I say, how people are being affected. So how many households? Do you have more single parent households or more larger families? I'm sure with our population, you can assume that you have larger families. You go out to the field and you see maybe one house, you may presume maybe have a 5-member family, will have about 12 people. And they may not even all be part of the same family. So they may be representing different dynamics and families. Also, when last did we have a census? Are we playing an assumption game with the reality of Nigeria? And then we expect, social policies that will come and fly. Even I'm happy that Shola spoke about the feeding program. I'm a huge fan of that. But I know some areas that have not even seen, a plate stock less of maybe 200. So who is giving the data? How are we using it? Do we even understand the dynamics of this new normal we're entering, right? Even with the losses of lives within this COVID-19, how do we know those numbers are really lesser or larger, right? And then you're giving palliatives to who? So I'm sure budgets, it'd be really interesting later on to research and see, how you're kind of promoting that accountability. And you're doing a great job with that because NGOs ourselves, we even need to know and understand the dynamics of government and if funding is going out, right? So it is really overwhelming, to be honest, because we need policies. I know this social policy you spoke about was, I think, established in 2004, and this year is going to end. But have you seen any, legislative members saying, "Oh, we need to revisit this policy"? Even lobbying. How do we need to bring the culture of lobbying even into Nigeria so that even if we talk about policies now together on this group chat and we have 5 people draft something, that thing that we draft, how are we sure that it's going to get to the end, the end system or get to the right hands? So I think it's beyond conversation, beyond us suggesting policy. How do we make sure that we're sitting on the right tables? as people in the private and social sector, as people who want to see a difference and want to make a change. In the policy, or rather the NGO sector, I can only be someone who may use technology, right? Permit me to go for that and say technology, maybe taking videos and showing that, you know, this Jakonde that you say, oh, maybe let's feed 500, there are actually 10,000 people here that need food, right? And using this technology to kind of make the data visualized so that maybe governments will even see. And also this thing about local autonomy, you know, I think it's high time and Nigeria explores. I know it's easier said than done, but if maybe, you know, the private and the social sector can give advisory policies, which is something that we don't really practice in Nigeria. We just come and we say, oh, let's draft this policy. This is what we should do, but nobody is giving advisory policies. You're not playing the game to say, okay, this is the interest of these legislators. This is what they want to do. How do we bring them to the table? I think the best bill that shows that was a Not Young to Run bill, because it was pushed by young legislators in the House of Assembly. So if we want to say social policy and social welfare, who are the people, you know, in this, in the Senate, you know, let's say in our House of Assemblies, in our local governments, who we can bring to the table and say, you see, we're in a new normal, things have changed, right? How do we get our constituents to understand that day-to-day living can be changed through entrepreneurship? You know, they don't necessarily need to go for jobs that, oh, gets 100 naira today so you can buy food, because a lot of people are suffering from that. And I'm happy that somebody mentioned that even bankers, even people in our invisible middle class, right? Because I'm sure that we know that the rich are getting richer, the poor people are getting poorer. Even people in this our middle class, you know, when we feed people and Jakonde, you'll be surprised to see some of the people that come and stand in the line. And then maybe your assumption will be like to tell the person, oh, sorry, we're not feeding your kind of people. But how do you justify that that person doesn't need that palliative generation? Right? So our dynamics are different. Nigeria is growing on a daily basis. So we need policies that have to do with maybe making census deliberate every 5 years, because we know our population is booming, right? So we need policies that not only talk about, oh, social welfare, working with banks or BVNs, understanding demographic, national IDs. We need, you know, policies that have to really focus on, you know, helping the social sector understand how to go about interventions, especially like I said earlier, needs-based and data-driven.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that insightful point, Jennifer. Bumi, what do you have to say on being the technology expert? So how do we solve the data infrastructure and general technology problem with regard to delivering social protection programs in Nigeria?
Yes. A lot has been said already. A lot of really, really beautiful points. You know, for me, it's a case where technology has a very, very big and important role to play. But technology is nothing if you don't have the right policies, right? Which is where Shola's point is very important. So I think we need to begin and make sure that we have a policy. Now, policy by itself is also not enough. On top of a policy, you now need a strategy, because otherwise the policy is just useless. It's just a piece of document. So we need a strategy, a clear strategy, a timeline, which underscores what Taiwo said, that here is 85 years of infrastructure. It's not just overnight. So we need a strategy, we need a timeline, and then everybody can now align around the strategy. NGOs, private sector, you know, government, you know, international development partners, they know this is your country's strategy. We don't have a strategy. We have a policy that's like expired. Those are 101 foundations. I get Taiwo's point. We have a culture of complaining, negative. We don't even celebrate the little things, and we get in trouble because of that, right? Which is a valid point. So we need to celebrate the little wins, because if we don't, what then happens is that every new administration, we scrap it, we start again. We scrap it, we start again. So our own 85-year journey, we haven't even started, because we reset every 4 years or 8 years. So valid point there. But again, policy, strategy, right? And then collaboration. I think that collaboration, and by the way, on the strategy side, a core piece of it has to be what Seun said, radical transparency. It has to be like non-negotiable, because the moment you do that, anywhere there's transparency, more money will come, right? see, government said, okay, COVID-19, government said, hey, we're doing 50 billion. Then the CA COVID private sector coalition said, we will do 120 billion, right? So you see the power of private sector there. We haven't even talked about like development partners and everything. That could be another 100 billion. You haven't even talked about Nigeria in diaspora. That could be another 50 billion. But all of those money would not come. Why? Because it's a black box. Because they can't see real time where the money is going. Again, data. Now, government that said, private sector that said they will do, 120 billion or whatever, guess how much of it has been redeemed? 27 billion. Mostly from the big banks and big billionaires. Why the difference between 27 billion and however 120 billion target? What do you think the difference is? Probably multiple reasons, but one of it might just be the fact that, can we trust where this money is going? Can we see who is the beneficiary in real time? And can we track that the outcome was achieved? My hypothesis is that if that was super transparent, because all this data tracking and accountability and this radical transparency infrastructure was there, not only will you get close to the 120 billion from private sector, you will unlock another 120 billion from development partners, you will unlock another 150 billion from diaspora. Every single diaspora person I talk to is now really emotionally connected to Nigeria now more than ever before. And every one of those people, because their family members are at risk, because they care about their community, et cetera, will wholeheartedly transfer, whether it's $100 or $500, whatever that might be, and count the number of diaspora people that we have. So for me, I think this is not rocket science. We just have to start from the basics and build on top of it. Now, after you have your policy, you have your strategy, and it's clear, and then you have this collaboration and this ethos of radical transparency. Now you have your technology rails, and there's a big role that technology can play as well, right? For example, if you have a national rails, like a beneficiary register, where everybody is contributing into. So the NGO that goes and wants to deliver meals in Jakonde should not start by saying, hey, who are all the people in Jakonde? Okay, do their targeting. Who are, all the people that qualify? Like literally everybody is building their own infrastructure. So waste. They also don't have the identity to make sure that somebody is not receiving the same benefit from different beneficiaries. So there's got to be a national strategy. There's got to be a national technology rails as well, which includes harmonizing the identity system. Again, it's not rocket science. Take BVN, take NIN, take SIMRED, take voters register, give it to some boys to spend like a month with machine learning, AI and everything. They will harmonize it. Worst case scenario, you get 80% of Nigeria that's clean. The remaining 20%, you now start going and use agent network to finish and clean it up. Again, these things are not very hard to do. So if you have a harmonized identity data, you know your beneficiary, you have your KYC, right? And then you essentially have a targeting mechanism, some shared beneficiary registry that everybody is contributing to. So any NGO that goes into a community, they use the opportunity to add to the database. They extract from the database and they add to it because it will help them next time. Like these things are not rocket science. And really, that's why Guardian Social Ventures was created as a company. We're just like, and we can't do it alone. There literally needs to be like 50 startups that is created, not just in technology, in strategy. That expertise, that industry needs to be developed. Even lobbyists, there's probably 10 lobbyist companies that should be created, right? Literally lobbying for these kinds of things. There's gotta be technology companies, there's gotta be database companies, there's gotta be analytics companies, there's gotta be, I don't know, there's a whole industry that needs to be developed because we are the, poverty capital of the world. 65% of people like in poverty. And when they say, oh, we have 120 billion or 25 billion, think about out of the 65% of 200 million, think about how many people they can reach. It's typically like 1%, 2%. They haven't even started. It's a joke. So that's really it for me. I think we need to just do something. It's frustrating.
Very, very brilliant submission. Thank you, Bumi. Thank you, Bumi. Seun, coming to you. How do we solve the accountability and transparency problem? In concrete steps, if you...
Yeah, I mean, we can look at short term, we can look at long term. Short term is more transparency and willingness to provide accountability when questions are being asked. It's not just enough about just publishing public data. When questions are being asked about those details, answers must be given, because that's fundamental to a functional democracy. People who are in offices do not exist on their own account. There's a sense of legitimacy that has been conferred upon them, and you are obliged, to always respond to queries from citizens. Even though I know our democracy is still on the path, but that's exactly what it should be like. I mean, questions being asked, and if you look at the IMF loan that we took, the $3.4 billion, part of the conditions to the loan is that we are going to have some radical transparency published online and showing detail of how the IMF loan it would be spent. So I've seen there's a platform called opentreasury.gov.ng. They've created a tab on it, even though the data is not there yet, but it shows that there's an intention to provide details of how the funds will be spent. That would be the first one. So when we do more transparency, the second level is that, because it's a state of mind to be able to receive feedback and to be able to react to it. I mean, people talk about citizens not properly educated. Sometimes, and most times, even the government or public officials are not even properly educated, that we don't exist in the feudal system, we don't exist in an autocracy, we exist in a democracy, which means you serve at the pleasure of the public. And so, I mean, that education has to constantly be there, but government be willing to open up and present those details to them. The third level is the technology itself that can make us make all of this happen easily. And so if you're providing data, or if you're using, for example, the Open Treasury platform, we have about 25,000 data sets that budget has mined from that platform in the last 4.5 months. I mean, but why do we have to spend all that overhead and all going through all that space? It's just because the data is not provided in the framework that makes it easy for us to be able to improve upon. If it was an API structure, how would we need someone for 4 months checking through data systems? So the government also must be able to appreciate the use of technology. How do you present data? So that the timeliness, that you need in making sure that this counts, it's very, very useful. In budget, we always think in 4 ways. We say, one, data has to be comprehensive, it has to be actionable, it has to be accurate, and it has to be timely. If these 4 things, if these 4 conditions are not met, comprehensiveness, being actionable, be timely, and if those things are not there, then there's no point, publishing the data, because you can say provision of face masks, 100 million naira. I mean, how many face masks did you buy? Where did you distribute this face mask? That level of data is not actionable. So we also must make sure that the data that's been provided meets some certain level of meets some quality criteria, so that citizens can act on the basis of that. I mean, and the last one is also about the financial capabilities of those who I call the intermediaries, which are also these NGOs. A lot of people talk about private sector being under struggling, and the public sector is struggling. Nobody has looked at even non-profits are also struggling, and they might not even have the capacity, to be able to take on some of this work. So we must also be able to champion deliberate support for some of the organizations. I mean, that are involved in the whole work of accountability and transparency. And that doesn't have to be budget alone. I mean, so many organizations also do this. Code does this, Action Aid, ANIJ, and the rest of things like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Seun. Deborah, I would pass it on to you now. Yes, we're still looking holistically at policies, structures, and systems we can put in place to make our social protection systems more sustainable. But more particularly, I would like you to speak on the financing problem that Taiwo had mentioned. So how do we solve the financing problem with regard to the delivery of the social protection systems and make them more sustainable?
Oh, I was muted. Permit me to take a go at it from a point of, great passion before I take an attempt at the financing problem. I feel like a broader, very important context that is relevant to the ongoing conversation at this moment is to reiterate, I mean, that's why we're here, but it's important to reiterate the very significant role of the social sector or the third sector. It is possible that the way the sector is currently constituted, even key players, civil society organizations, nonprofits, social entrepreneurs, impact-driven innovators do not recognize how significant they are to trigger every next level of development for the nation. I was in Minnesota, many months ago, and I got the opportunity to just spend a lot of time with nonprofit organizations and impact investors. Minnesota has the highest amount of nonprofits in the United States. It is one of the 5 wealthiest states in the US. It is one of the top 3 best places to live in. It is one of the cleanest states, right? It is a huge contributor to the economy. And it has a large amount of Native Americans who are usually at the lower rank of the pyramid, right? So they are experiencing, different degrees of poverty, but in Minnesota, they are the best cared for, and they have the closest or easiest access to interventions and infrastructure. So what I started to see and what got reiterated as I listened to a lot of the nonprofit leaders in Minnesota was the tremendous impact that the social sector was having on the economy and how it was impacting on the state itself. So it is very key not to continue to think about the third sector as just happenstance or, filled with a bunch of altruistic, passionate, but not very strategic or intellectual people, right? Or to just think that people who don't get a great job just get dumped into that sector, or those who just have a passion for the poor but don't know how to get a seat at the table with the private sector are those who play here. The future of the continent and its prosperity in an emerging sense, especially in the face of the disruptions that are being created by a global pandemic, is very connected to the effectiveness of the third sector. So I'm excited about a dialogue such as this, and I truly believe that we must begin to really not just say it. In fact, in saying it, I almost want to laugh because it's such a mouthed word. We say it all the time, right? But we must really begin to invest in multi-level, multi-sectoral collaborations. Now, the reason it is more important today than ever is because honestly, the types of challenges and crisis that we're facing in Nigeria and in other, African nations is what I call a wicked problem. It is woven into themselves. It is connected. So you can't even try to tackle a problem from one impact area point of view. You can't just say it's education. Education is linked to gender. It's linked to vulnerable children. It's linked to drug and substance abuse. It's linked to healthcare. So if we are going to be able to tackle the degree of the wicked problems that we're confronted by as a nation and really deliver social welfare, social protection type programs, we must really begin to work together. Really work together. The silos has to break. There's got to be a developed ecosystem that can drive the degree of change we're looking for. And I write on the back of that quickly to say, from that point of building a sector that has a voice so that it becomes like a very organized engine for development, we can then begin to get behind the doors and get conversations with the government. What Taiwo said is just so profound. It touched me in a very powerful way, because the honest truth is you would even begin to discover that the government, even when it has the best intentions, is sometimes just at loss as to what to really do, right? Okay, it looks like Shea is just hanging. I just hope the network is still great. I can see Taiwo, I can see Shola. Okay, looks good, right? So the government sometimes has the great intentions, but doesn't even have field data. So in the midst of saying, oh, we don't have data, the interesting thing is that we who are the social saviors, engaging the beneficiaries, moving into the communities, are meant to be custodians of the most accurate data. We are meant to be providers of this data to the government. So the game has to change. You know, when Taiwo said this, and I had to write it down, I just said, my God, that's it. Data-driven policy rides on the tracks of data-driven personnel. So we as players in the impact-driven social sector have to improve capacities for collating data, analyzing data, publishing data. Do you see, if budget wants to train the sector and begin to work with frontline professionals, then let us do that. But we do need to become providers of support, local content, and data-driven solutions to the government, saying, how can we do this? And that is where, if we were coming together as a force, we will be heard quicker. I had, you know, an interview session with Olusegun Igbinde just a few days ago, extremely brilliant. I mean, he's just that amazing. And I was asking questions around, help us understand the character and the ego of the government, because we're starting to see that as long as we keep treating the government as the enemy, because we keep picking drop balls of inefficient leadership and you know, governance, and we keep treating the government as the enemy, we are not going to get as far as we will get. The final thing that I would love to share as far as the funding mechanisms are concerned is really that the game is going to change in the new normal for every impact-driven organization. Now, Ideation Hub has been, providing social profit incubation for early stage social entrepreneurs. And one of the things we continue to say is we must be healed of this unhealthy reliance on philanthropy and funding from international development organizations. And we must begin to use an innovative enterprise model internal to our own organizations to fund the interventions that we want to create for the community. Do you see? So social entrepreneurship is no longer just going to be a buzzword. It's going to be a model of delivering intervention, giving value for value, earning sufficiently to stay sustainable, because the problem is not a short-term type situation. And so we must be built and reinforced for the long term. And then finally, it has been said again and again, I would like to really say that Nigeria has resources. It is possible to stand on the side of the government so much and be like, we are a poor economy. We are not just poor because it was handed to us. We are poor because we have grossly mismanaged resources. So the whole conversation around radical accountability is going to be so key. There are resources, but we have too many leakages, right? So if we begin to plug the leakages and grow accountability, be sure that we're definitely going to have more funds and we can do a lot more with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deborah. That was really insightful. Key points around the mindset shift with regards to the social sector, and also how different players in the ecosystem need to come together to collaborate so that we have a harmonized system. Because I'd wanted to go there, but thank you for bringing it to fore. Taiwo and Shola, I think I'll come to both of you now. Being actors and players in the social sector space, what can the government start differently? Hearing all the submissions from Debola, Bumi, Sheung, and Jennifer.
Okay, if I go first. When we say government, I want to ask, who is government? We, the people, are the government. And I'm glad that people here on the panel are actually not just identifying the problems, but also providing what the solutions are. One key thing I want to push to everyone here, which I assume a government, who I identify as government, is perhaps the Ventures Garden Group should organize a poverty roundtable or a post-COVID development roundtable, where the different stakeholders can come together and harness all these ideas that are being put out. Let everybody come to the conversation table, and let's understand what the problems are of people from all these different sectors. Can you hear me? My internet is unstable.
Yes, okay, I can hear you.
Yeah. So that is very critical. And I like the point where Jennifer did say that NGOs and innovators and entrepreneurs should begin to look at playing a role being advisors around policy. Instead of waiting for MBS, MBS is the official government data point. How can we have people like Budget pushing out data, and not just Budget, a lot of other people demanding and influencing, just like we have Not Too Young to Run, a lot of those things come in. And another thing I would also say is around communication. Government is doing quite a lot, but it lacks massively around communication. So there were questions asked around, okay, so if the social protection policy is due for review this year, I think the first one was 2016, just a 4-yearly thing. Why is it that we don't have that information out there? So, a coordinated government process where someone is actually giving out this information to the public for them to know, that is not happening. But because I understand, I'm in some meetings, I know that these kind of things are happening, and one is not exactly in positions to share those information. So I do agree that going forward, those are the things that government should look at. And our legislatures also should begin to champion that. I like the leadership of the Speaker of the House now. Look at I know a lot of feedback was received around the Infectious Disease Act. That is proactive, even though we are responding to what the issues are right now. Those are things that we should applaud. But around communication, government should do more around communication. I think another thing I would like to mention is there are also misunderstanding of what the data out there is being pushed on Nigeria. Nigeria is not the poverty capital of the world. And the company that published that report was World Data Lab. World Data Lab did say specifically on their website that what the methodology that they used, what they used was, for instance, when you look at, they use, of course, AI is very good, but there are some things that don't apply in Nigeria. They use night vision. So for instance, they look at a particular place at night and they see, oh, there are no electricity there. So that means the places are poor. Those things cannot be measured for Nigeria. For where there are residential buildings versus where there are offices, like in Abuja, for instance, you have the secretariat very close to where people live. So you can't, so a lot of those things are things that were faulted, and they wanted to collaborate with the Nigerian government. So, and another thing is, so when we see the private sector actually leading and championing and wanting to collaborate and have information, the resistance or the bureaucracy or the civil service process and rules is just so, it's just so hard for those people to just, the hoops are just too difficult for people to pass through. And that's why the information out there is never updated. I go back to my point where granular subnational data is very critical. And like Debola has said, instead of waiting for government, let's go out there. But a lot of these things, because it's massive data that you want to collect, we need to collaborate with governments to do that. And where would that funding come from? So the loans that we collect are maybe on education, in infrastructure, like the repatriated funds that came back to Nigeria recently that will be used for infrastructure. Do we have monitoring and evaluation and data analysis and impact? Then we don't have all of those things. When we look at those that are signing on the part of government for the loans that we collect, what are they signing on behalf of government? What are those so I think all of those things should be our justice system, our legal process system, a lot of input from different stakeholders, especially people at the community level. We actually do think, maybe we at this federal level or state level, we think we can speak for people at community level. We cannot exactly speak for them because their perception of the world is different from some of our own perception of the world, and that is very critical. So, but what I would want to call as a call to action would be, can we have a poverty roundtable? Can we have a development roundtable where all these ideas, and this one I'm pushing over to Guardian, the social Guardian, sorry, I just mixed up, to the organizer.
Guardian Social Ventures.
Yes, absolutely. Can we have this as a takeaway from our conversation and actually bring all the NGOs, the innovators, and the political people to the table and take these ideas forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Shola. Thank you, Shola. We have also noted that action item on having a poverty roundtable discussion. Taiwo, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I feel like my colleagues on the panel have provided extremely brilliant insights. So I don't really have much to add to this. I will say this though. Our government and our public sector has operated with significant opaqueness for decades. That's not going to change overnight, right? People will not make themselves accountable by choice. People will not make themselves accountable out of evolution of goodwill. What needs to happen is larger society has got to hold government to a greater level of scrutiny. And I think the work here lies on the shoulders of the CSOs, civil society organizations, and the NGOs. And you've got to hold government accountable. You've got to call them out. And at the point, there was a lot of talk about the corruption that was in our extractive industries. And you saw some CSOs come to the table and start to talk about transparency. And I know we're nowhere out, not out of the woods yet, but certainly that had to have helped. Like budget really shining the light on what it's doing. And I think we've just got to be much more deliberate about this. And this needs to happen at every level. And the federal government definitely level accountability to the people. I think also at the state levels as well. One thing that is clear, for instance, out of this whole COVID-19 crisis is that we had very little crisis preparedness planning in Nigeria. We just were not prepared for any such crisis, right? We're so busy dealing with the day-to-day hardship of living in Nigeria that we never envisaged any of this. That's a problem, and that's potentially a problem that the CSO could have identified or helped identify at some point before all of this happened. And I think the CSOs really are the ones that can take on this mantle, and it requires being more deliberate, more strategic. It requires being way smarter than the government, right? That's one. Second is also focusing on two things. One, operational transparency, right? There's just the day-to-day. How much came in? Where did it go to? How many people benefited? How many benefited on Monday versus Tuesday versus Wednesday or Thursday? And then there's tracking it all the way down to outcomes, right? It's great and it's awesome to track the day-to-day, but the end game here, guys, is to move the needle forward on social development index, to move the needle forward on quality of life for our people. And so the CSOs have got to chase government all the way down to outcomes. So let's say, for instance, you look at the social investment programs. What was government signing up to at the beginning of this journey, right? Where are we today? 2 years from now or 4 years from now, when we take a second look, how well are we moved on those outcomes? And it's that information that gives CSO a bargaining chip at the table when they go to policymakers and they go to lawmakers and make certain demands, because you can track it all the way down to outcomes. And I'm just going to echo. Okay, so another point I will make is on technology, is that this is a massive opportunity, right? I mean, Bumi called some really big numbers, right? Like 100 billion, 150 billion, 50 billion. The reality is that it's a massive economic opportunity. There's a whole industry that is waiting to be developed here. There are thousands of people that can be employed. There are all sorts of amazing things that can come out of this if we just get our acts together. And I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen in small instances when you look at a program like Jeep, and you just need smart people and great technology to get the work done. And guess what? You have to be willing to pay for that, right? So this is great business, right? For those who know how to act on it. And the third piece is to echo a point I made earlier about people. All of this falls apart if you don't have the right people in the conversation, right? I say all the time that, we don't have our best and brightest people in the public sector in general, right? Just to be clear, there are amazing people in the public sector, very brilliant. But in general, when you have that smart, kid come out of university, they're not raising their hand to say, oh, I want to go work in government. They're not. They're going to the banks, they're going to the telcos. Worse still, they go to Yaba and launch their startup, right? They would rather go down the path of being entrepreneurs than to step into the public sphere, right? And so I think we've got to make it a much more valuable proposition to our young, smart people to take a career in government. That is what changes things. If I look at our own experience in JIP, I used to be in the private sector for years, and a lot of my colleagues on the JIP team similarly used to be in the private sector and did amazing work there. And every tech vendor that came to pitch us was always surprised by how much tech we knew, right? And they were just always surprised because they never expected that quality of thinking and that rigor of thinking from a government program. And I think we've got just to be deliberate to force really smart people into the right seats. They should be on the others, like rather than me building technology to come and sell to government, right, as a techie, perhaps I should be the one sitting in that government chair evaluating all the vendors coming, because then I can raise the bar, I can ask for more, I can demand more, right? And then at that point, when you do that at scale, you will see significant change. So that's the third piece. I think all of these things we're saying, a lot of it rests also on just getting the right people, the smartest brains we have in the country, into the public sector.
Thanks a lot, Taiwo. Thanks a lot, Taiwo. Now, very interesting submissions from our panelists. Now, entertain a few questions from the audience before we call it a day. First off, I would allow Olumide Fagbeson talk.
The question I have, I would like to...
Could you introduce yourself, sorry, where you work, and then go straight to the question? Hello, Olumide, are you there?
I'm a pastor at the international headquarters of CAC Agbala Itura.
Okay, thank you. Proceed to your question.
All right. I would like to ask that what are the measures that can be put in place so that every citizen of Nigeria will know the importance of data collection? Because sometimes ago, during the regime of President Goodluck Jonathan, the educational sectors introduced a subject called data processing to all level of the schools, but it is optional. It is not compulsory. So I'm thinking that, is there anything that we can do so that every one of us, like the meeting what we've been hearing from the panelists, I now see the importance of data collection than before. So what are the things that can be put in place so that people all over Nigeria will know the importance of collecting data?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Olumide. Any panelists want to answer the question, or do I pick someone specifically?
I mean, Olumide is a good friend of mine.
I actually wanted to call you Shio.
Just Olumide is a good friend of mine, so I would privately still educate him more on data collection. And I feel a lot of things can be politicized, ethnicized in Nigeria. Because by the time you start talking about data now, suspicion starts growing. Are we more in the north than the south? We have more than in the south. And those challenges just keep popping up much more. We have to, I had this conversation yesterday that we have to deliberately tie it to the social contract that's guaranteed by democracy. In a democracy, the government should know its people. The people should also understand their rights and obligations to the government. And I think if we frame the conversation that way, it can be much more genuine. And we are due for a census. Now that requires a whole lot of resources, but we have been doing census like before, which you just count people. This is our chance to count people by household, be able to interlink the data systems all together. And so we should go for it. And I think we are due for a campaign on that. Nigeria requires a comprehensive single data reference. And until you're able to do that, so your driver's license, your passport, your voter's ID, your SIM registration, every single element is linked to that single reference. I mean, like, I'm in the US, I'm stuck in the US now, but I'm not a US citizen, I'm not a permanent resident. I can't get I didn't get $1,200 because I can't get a mortgage waiver, even though I wish to get one. I mean, so in some sort of way, because you don't have a social security number, the government does, you are taken out of the social contract circle of government. So, I mean, we have to build that narrative in that way. And I'm not saying government should give 1,200 to Nigerians. We don't have the resources for that. Even if it's 20,000 naira, even if it's Gary, but it gets to the right people that need Gary, at that point in time. I mean, and so that's what I'm trying to say, that we need to build this conversation into social contracts. I mean,
It's largely answered the question. Oh, okay. Shem is back. Shem, are you done? Okay, yes, he is. Okay, thank you. Next.
Shaya, are you back? Okay. Hello. Okay, Shaya, we lost you for a bit there. Do you mind coming again?
Hi,
Hello?
sorry, can you hear me?
Go ahead, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So Ibioko, you have a floor. Okay. Consent. Samuel Akpan, let's hear your question. I can't seem to.
Hello?
Okay, Shegun, yes, you can ask a question.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Shegun Malegemi. I am one of the co-founders of the Next Incubation Hub in Yaba. I guess I'm one of those people that somebody accused of, of housing and harboring the young, smart people rather than releasing them to government. I have a question, and this one goes particularly to Shola. We're talking about the poverty roundtable, and if you bring up that mix of data collection that so many people have raised, I am one who believe we have, even though we do not have sufficient data, we have enough data to take action. I also believe that the issue of poverty cannot be tackled strictly from a point of social intervention programs. Typical example, somebody has rice. Tomorrow he sees someone giving rice, he goes back and collects rice. And it becomes what? It becomes a complete drain on the economy. I mean, one reason why most governors and most governments are opening their...
Shego, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could you ask your questions?
Okay.
Yes,
my question is very straightforward, Shola. Shouldn't the government be moving away from social intervention programs? Shouldn't they be moving more to structural empowerment? What I mean is that shouldn't they be moving from giving people money to bringing communities together, giving them production targets and empowering them, based on what they supply to the national, global national GDP?
Okay, thank you. Shola, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Shegun. Thanks for attending. Shegun is my friend, so thank you for putting that question.
Okay.
Right, yeah. Okay, I must say, just like I said earlier, government needs to do more. And I also say government in the sense of we, the people, constituting government, should do more around communication. But in this sense, the social protection policy is comprehensive and covers what we have just highlighted. Can I mention that when we talk about social protection or social contract, we should look at the entire social space and how people are multidimensionally poor. Those sectors would include the health sector, it will include water and sanitation, which they call WASH, it will look at social housing. So it's not what Nigerians have seen during the pandemic is what they identify, a lot of people identify as the intervention that government does around social protection. It goes way deeper than that. Taiwo has spoken extensively on the support to the micro, small, medium enterprises. How within clusters for we have the farmer money, you have the market money, you have a lot of these are driven by some principles. For instance, financial inclusion. You have people that are not in the formal sector of banking and they can't have access to loan because they don't even have bank accounts. We can talk about, oh, you need to transfer money through a BVA, but how would you even do that? They don't even have accounts in the bank. So how do you lure them? You look at the cost benefit. If I give them cash now, or if I just give them some benefits or some palliatives, how would that bring them into the formal sector? That's why you see the trader money is giving 5,000 to people. The next loan they will get, it will be deposited in their account. So that lures them into the formal sector. They create a bank account, and then that starts from there. They build a credit history. They move on to another, and so that there is a graduation from poverty. But straight to your question is, let's have a proper holistic understanding of what maybe social contract is or the social protection. It is holistic, it is multidimensional, it looks at different sectors. It includes the justice sector, it includes the health sector, the education sector, and all of those. So, and it also addresses the point that you've raised, where people actually pay based on the work that they do in a very structured way. The communication of that needs to be out there, which is not.
Okay, thank you, Shaw. We'll have 2 more questions and then we'll call it a day. Buki Shonibare, you can ask your question.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. First, let me thank the panelists. I've really been so enriched by being part of this webinar. And thanks to the organizers as well. So I have just, so my name is Buki Shonibare. I'm founder Girl Child Africa. And I'm also the founder of Invictus Center, a center that is focused on data collection, research and documentation, and legal reforms. So my question goes to Debola, and the question is on what you said about social sector being or becoming the organized engine for development. And that was when you were sharing about your experience in Minnesota. Could you share with us, or could you help me understand how those social sector organizers or owners of NGOs or CSOs where you have been, could you share lessons on how they are able to achieve this, being the organized engine for development? And that is me coming from the perspective of one that is interested in getting CSOs together, to drive certain changes. We've done some recently, but, getting better at that is something I would like to learn, and I would love to learn from you based on where you've been. Thank you.
Thank you, Buki. Debola.
So thank you so much, Buki. Great work you're doing, and thank you for the question. So I'm just going to share a few things that I can call like just lessons from my interactions with them, as well as with my work running an accelerator and interacting a lot with early stage social entrepreneurs and impact-driven professionals. Primarily, the first thing that hit me that was very apparent and was even at play in the University of Minnesota, where I was having an executive education in public policy, was first of all, a very strong beneficiary-centric and community-centric approach to social interventions, to data harvesting. Yes, so I mean, and I think that was what Jennifer opened with. It was just really powerful. what I found with Minnesota and what I've continued to see with, you know, a lot of more developed social sectors in other climes is an approach to crafting interventions for impact areas or along the lines of the Sustainable Development Goals that really draw context from the communities they want to serve, right? NGOs or civil society organizations, innovation-based startups cannot sit in the room and determine what is going to solve a certain type of crisis or what will be the right intervention. So you can't say you want to fix public primary education and you put noodles and pen and comb in a bag with socks and hand it to children. You need to be certain that their parents even want them to be in school, right? So those are realities that really hit me in the face in my time in Minnesota. It's first a very strong beneficiary-centric, community-centric type approach to creating interventions, really creating the right context for what we believe to be the answers, right, to you know, the issues we want to provide solutions to. So even your best in class global practices have to be localized within the reality of your beneficiaries or the people that your work is to serve. And I found that really interesting. And of course, that piggybacks very strongly on the provision of data. Now having these interactions and getting into the grassroots and, you know, being set within the context of their own realities begins to provide you with very agile data that grows on the people and grows with the people and changes, you know, evolves, matures as their outcomes and their, you know, their dynamics also change. Do you see? Yes. So, but a real, so yes, that's the first thing that I found very interesting. There's also a very strong utilization of technology, even the areas, and of course that comes with being a way more developed economy, but it's something we should aspire to. So even the areas that are considered like lower on the rung, more on the bottom of the pyramid, those considered to be vulnerable, the vulnerable demographic, I mean, it's still accessible. Technology is still significantly utilized, right? And those things also spool the right amount of data. So if you go into communities and you are constantly writing on paper, using questionnaires to ask questions in their language, and you don't get to transfer that and analyze, which happens often. I've had NGOs who lost a large amount of data in transit because they lost, you know, where they had these questionnaires. So the use of technology is definitely very powerful. Now, let me just share 3 more things that hit me very clearly with the Minnesota nonprofit space and how it impacts on the US.
You may have to be quick about that.
Okay, I'm just going to share one.
Thank you.
Let me just share one, it's fine. And that one will be the fact that there is a very large nonprofit that has created a technology repository for data. So if you go do a work in education or in healthcare or economic empowerment or whatever, right? You spool data from that community you worked in. You just have to plug into this repository and donate that data you have, right? And that is how in the last 10 years, Minnesota has now created a powerful data bank that was pulled in by its practitioners within the social sector. And I think that's such a brilliant idea. So if we could do something like that, Jennifer does a work feeding this, you know, these beneficiaries in Jakonde currently. She gives us that data, what Shea is doing, what Taiwo is doing, what Shola is doing, and they have this field data at a granular level. They spool it into that repository. Over time, it becomes something accessible to the practitioners across different impact areas. That was very important for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Debola. Last question will be from Ibioku. I can't seem to unmute him, so there's a last question here that I'll take from the Q&A module from Shegun Elujoba. Jennifer, I would direct this question to you. It says, with the opportunities that exist in technology gap, how can NGOs begin to reduce this gap and become the data provider? Ideally, would like to hear views from both social and technology panelists. Jennifer, did you get the question?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So one way we can do this is actually like what Debola just said, getting this raw data, so locally harvesting it and maybe analyzing it to the needs of our society. But apart from that, it's also maybe creating jobs within this as well. So one idea that we had just last week was, we see a lot of these young people that are on ground, there are no jobs, right? So what if we actually make them on ground data harvesters themselves, teach these people skills of how to tally numbers, how to get data, and basically put it, forward for our own use, but also maybe the government's use as well. And the major thing about social tech is that we have to understand that innovation is going to have to play a role, in this new normal, right? We have to make sure that we're kind of leveraging technology to not only do things of now, but also forecast, right? Forecast what we're going to be seeing in our sector, forecast what we're probably going to be seeing with welfare and other things. So for us, it's really making sure that we're getting data now and analyzing it. For example, now, I don't know how many people on this call know that Venture Garden Group themselves have the M&E mapping tool, right? Which we can use locally, right? To impute, indicators, to even help us understand the SDGs that we're even facing. So it's beyond just doing technology because we want to have data. I want to also know that we're reaching impact, right? We want to be impact driven. So, those kind of things, working between private and social sector, making sure that even some of us don't have the skills maybe to analyze the data, who can we work with, on the other end? I think that's how we can measure, the social and technological parts. So I hope that answers, our question.
Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer. Now, quickly, I would like each of our panelists to give about 30-second closing remarks, starting with Bumi.
Okay, thanks, Sheye, and I'd like to thank everybody on the panel. I think the quality of the conversation has been really deep, but at the same time, it's clear that the problem of Nigeria is not the ideas, it's not the strategy, it's not the concept. Everything we've talked about here is in some document locked up somewhere, right? I think it's really more around the courage. I think it's really more around the courage. I think it's really more around the collective intelligence and the synergy, right? I think it's all about the sense of urgency. And I think now is the time more than ever before, to take advantage of the current sense of urgency, meaning COVID-19, to say that, guys, there's this massive tsunami of negative economic impact that is hitting. Let's use this as an opportunity to just say, all right, like it's now or never. So sense of urgency. Then courage to make bold decisions, right? Courage to just go at it and say, hey, there's going to be 10 tech companies that's going to come out of this space, and we're going to back them, we're going to support them. They're going to get massive contracts to do all of this work. There's going to be 200 NGOs that are going to be center of excellence, that are going to do it right, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's going to be government that's going to literally say that, hey, in 4 weeks, there's a cleaned up policy. In 8 weeks, there's a clear strategy. In 16 weeks, all development partners operating in Nigeria must align. All NGOs must align. All government agencies that's running their own siloed system within Ministry of Agriculture, Education, all of these places are aligned. And all state governments must go and develop their own, must domesticate it to their own states and run their own, that federal will not have anything to do with, but everybody will share a collective set of capabilities, best practices, technology, and domesticate it into their use. I think that is what we should do moving forward, because if we don't do it now, then we've lost it all.
Thank you, Bumi. Thank you, Bumi. Seun, you have the floor now. 30 seconds, please.
All right, I will stay by 30 seconds. What do I know? But I mean, to me, thank you so much, everyone. Shola, Debola, Bumi, Taiwo, everyone. I mean, it's been incredible to hear from you. And I think the fundamentals have been laid down. We know what to do in Nigeria. I mean, we know the right things to do. And we know what to do because we know what others have done, you know, to get them to where they are. I mean, we don't need to walk a journey of 100 years. We could do it in 10 if we really put our minds to it. So my own point is, and I know you guys, I mean, Venture Garden Group, Garden Social Ventures, there will be maybe government will listen more to you. I mean, I don't know. Budget is not the best friends of government, even though we're in this friendly kind of system. But maybe government will listen to you. So please talk to them. I mean, talk to them. Government guys have UG goals. I mean, so it's always difficult for sometimes your approach might be much more pleasing to their ears. But what I want is that we know what to do. Let's go for it. Let's put our steps in one place. Let's help our people. I mean, in a much more holistic way. Thank you.
Thank you, Seun. Jennifer.
All right, I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. We know the whole world is basically moving forward. So instead of us acting like we don't want to do catch up, I think it's time for us to actually level up. We need data. We need to literally show the world that, you know, Nigeria has the capacity to take care of its own people, right? And to make sure that every human has equal opportunity to live life to its fullest. So one way we can definitely do that is making sure that the social sector, tech sector, like Debola said, isn't just overlooked, but seen as, you know, the champions of change, literally, in this new normal.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. Taiwo?
So thanks to GSV for having me back. And thank you to Bumi and you know, Debola, Jennifer, Shola, my co-panelists, and everyone. So I would say, for those that are in the trenches now, please don't give up. All right, please don't give up. This is the time the country needs you more than ever before. Right, and working in Nigeria, working on big social problems can be in itself be draining. I mean, I don't know anyone that has been in any one of these roles for 4 or 5 years. After a while, you just need to check out, right? Just tap out, leave the ring, and somebody comes back in. So wherever it is you're working from, whether in government, as a service provider, as a technical advisor, as a CSO that's partnering with government, please do not give up. Stay in there. This is where the country needs you the most. Second is, I think we need to align on a couple of big transformative projects that form the foundation of everything. And it's very clear, like a single, citizen register is one very important piece that we need to do. So let's just go out and get it done, right? I think, even the government cannot say no when all the CSOs and NGOs and public sector players come together and say, okay, on this one, no, let's get it done, right? And I think that, the last piece here is that we've got to collaborate more. We've got to do more together. I think the effort, one of the silver linings of this COVID crisis has been to see how much collaboration has actually, emerged in this public sector space, right? Where government is doing something, private sector is doing something, CSOs are doing things, NGOs are doing things, and then you have NGOs that are set up just to support other NGOs. I hadn't seen that before. They're like, I'm going to raise all this money, and I don't want to give directly to individuals. I want to give it to other NGOs who are on the front lines. And I think we've got to build on that spirit and take it into the rest of the work.
Okay,
so guys,
thank you, Taiwo. Thank you, Taiwo. Shola, please, 30 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely 30 seconds. Firstly, let's collaborate and join hands with government to redefine who the poor is, what inequality is, what poverty is. Very important. Making it a participatory role, making it a participatory process is something that we can't negotiate. And standing by the side, criticizing government, I know this government has done quite a lot, working with NGOs, for instance, Action Aid, trying to pull information together, trying to make sure that they represent. But a lot of these NGOs have actually, or CSOs have actually fall by the line, thinking that it is important for them to criticize, for them to be negative, for people to perceive that they are actually working. I think working collaboratively with government in a positive manner is very critical. But beyond that, for things to work in Nigeria, there must be policies that are put in place. Those policies should have implementable action plans, and those action plans should have funding that would back it up. Our budgeting process should be—
Thank you, Shaw.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you. Debola, you have the floor, please.
So thank
Debola,
you.
are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me.
Okay.
I had a really great time. Thank you to the brilliant panelists. Great learning experience. And then thank you to you, to Sheye, because your moderation was top notch. It was brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you. A number of things I wanted to say have been clearly stated. So I will just add one other critical thing. It's a call to the social saviors. That's what I call them. The impact-driven entrepreneurs, the not-profit professionals, those who play at the fringes between the government and the civil society, to reevaluate, take it as a season for vision clarifying, and for determining again afresh your theory of change and what is your mission. Be so super clear, be so crystal clear on why you are here, what you want to do, and what you consider to be the most adaptable strategies to leverage. There will be in the emerging seasons a likelihood of a mission stretch, a mission creep. People are going to be trying to see how they can do what they can do to seem closer to solving a COVID problem. But know that COVID has a far-reaching effect and touches all spheres of our humanity. So be clear on your theory of change, stick with it, and be the best at solving a problem you believe you can solve.
Thank you. Thank you, Debola. So thanks a lot, everyone, and most especially to our panelists. It indeed has been an illuminating session on building a more robust and resilient social protection system in Nigeria. We will now have the closing remarks from the conference manager and senior business analyst at Guardian Social Ventures, Jennifer Nneji. Jennifer.
Thank you, Sheye. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. This has really been wonderful. I want to say thank you to everybody that has been able to attend this event. The first of so many that is yet to come. GSV is going to be doing a lot of this, and we appreciate some of the feedback that we've gotten. We thank you, the panelists, for all the insightful things around data, collaboration, infrastructure, even the things that we're taking away from this, which is actually to now start talking about how we can pull the different stakeholders within the social space and make the social space, or social saviors, as Debola would say, be more in the front line, and then pushing out these conversations to the government and doing something, moving things forward. So we are really grateful. I want to say a big thank you to everyone, even to the team that has actually worked on this project within a short period of time. We've been able to deliver this, and there'll be more of this. I want to also thank those that have attended this event. Please feel free to tag us in all your tweets and everything that you're going to be sharing after this. We'll be actually sending emails to everybody with the recordings, and also help us to let us know how you felt about this event and what we can do better. So we'll be sending that survey out. Also drop your information in the survey that we've also shared to get that, so that we can always keep in touch and also invite you for new and future events. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you, team. Thank you for all those that have attended this event. I wish you a very good evening and a happy weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. On that note, we bring to this social sector dialogue to a close. Our profound gratitude once again to our panelists for such an engaging and enlightening session, and to everyone who logged in across the globe. I'm Osheye, and it was a pleasure hosting you today. Do have a good evening and stay safe. Bye for now.
Right.
Thank you all. Thank you, Taiwo.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Debola. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Sheye, well done.
I'm trying to drop off. Can someone drop me off? I don't know why my computer is freezing. But thanks, guys, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was good to have you. Thank you, Taiwo. Yeah.
Thank you, Taiwo.
Great job. Thank you. Okay. Jennifer, well done. Thumbs up.
Thank you, Funmi.
All right.